My name is Amber Hayes and I'm 28 years old. 3 months ago, I watched security footage of my sister Stephanie pushing me down a flight of stairs while my parents stood frozen, doing nothing. The fall left me with a broken arm, fractured ribs, and a concussion. But the betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. For years, I questioned if I was crazy for feeling like the invisible child in my family. Now I have proof. Before I tell you how my own sister tried to end my life, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in what looked like the perfect upper-middle-class family from the outside. My father, David. Our home was in one of those neighborhoods with manicured lawns and holiday decoration contests. We had the 4-bedroom house, the family dog, and the annual summer vacations, all the trappings of the American dream. But beneath that picture-perfect surface was a painful reality I lived with every day. I was the second daughter. The afterthought, the one who never quite measured up. My sister Stephanie is 2 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, she was the sun our family orbited around. Stephanie had the kind of conventional beauty that made strangers stop my mother in grocery stores to compliment her. Long blonde hair that naturally fell in perfect waves, bright blue eyes, and the kind of outgoing personality that made her the center of attention in any room. She was a cheerleader, homecoming queen, and prom queen, the complete high school popularity package. On the other hand, was quieter, more introspective. I had my mother's brown hair and my father's hazel eyes. Nice enough, but nothing that ever drew compliments from strangers. But somehow these achievements always seemed less important to my parents. Amber, not everyone can be as naturally gifted as your sister, my mother would say when I complained about the unfairness. Stephanie just needs more support. You've always been so independent. Independent wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. When I was 7, I had my first piano recital. I practiced for weeks, excited to show my parents what I'd learned. The day of the recital arrived, and I put on my special dress, ready for my moment. But Stephanie suddenly developed a stomachache an hour before we were supposed to leave. My parents stayed home with her, sending me to the recital with my piano teacher. I performed to an audience of strangers, with no family to cheer me on. Later that evening, I found Stephanie eating ice cream and watching TV. Miraculously recovered. When I told my parents I'd won a certificate for best performance, my father absently said, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to Stephanie's story about something that had happened at school that week. This wasn't an isolated incident. When I was 12, I made it to the state spelling bee finals. My parents promised they'd be there. The night before, Stephanie's soccer team made it to a regional tournament scheduled for the same day. Guess which event my parents attended? I took second place at that spelling bee, with only my English teacher there to witness it. Your sister's events are team activities, my father explained later. She needs the support of her family. You understand, right? You've always been so mature for your age. What could I say? I nodded and pretended it didn't hurt. The worst part wasn't just my parents' favoritism. It was Stephanie's awareness and exploitation of it. In front of my parents, she was the loving big sister, always hugging me and telling me how proud she was of her little sis. But when we were alone, a different Stephanie emerged. When I was 14, I spent weeks working on a painting for a major art competition. The night before it was due, I left it to dry in our shared study space. The next morning, I found it ruined. Someone had accidentally spilled water all over it. Stephanie was so sorry about her clumsy mistake. My mother told me I should have been more careful about where I left my things. For my 16th birthday, I saved up to buy concert tickets for my favorite band. 2 days before the concert, the tickets disappeared from my desk drawer. Stephanie suggested I must have lost them due to my disorganization. They mysteriously reappeared in our bathroom trash can the day after the concert. When we were in high school, Stephanie started a rumor that I had cheated on a major exam, simply because a boy she liked had asked me for help with his homework. The rumor was eventually disproven, but not before it damaged my reputation with teachers who had previously respected me. These patterns continued as we grew older. Stephanie would borrow my clothes without asking and return them damaged. She would interrupt me when I was speaking at family gatherings, talk over me. Why can't you just get along with your sister? my mother would sigh. She loves you so much. By the time I graduated high school, I knew I needed to get as far away as possible. I applied to colleges on the opposite coast and accepted a scholarship to an art school in Seattle. The distance helped, but family dynamics don't change just because there are more miles between you. I built a successful career as a graphic designer, eventually starting my own small agency that specialized in branding for sustainable businesses. My work was featured in major design publications. Stephanie didn't respond until 3 days later, when she sent a message announcing she'd been promoted to regional sales manager at her pharmaceutical company. My parents called her immediately to celebrate. For 3 years, I managed to avoid more than brief holiday visits with my family. I built a life I was proud of, filled with supportive friends and meaningful work. I went to therapy to address the lingering effects of growing up as the less favored child. I was healing, creating boundaries. The call from my mother came on a rainy Tuesday evening in March as I was finishing up work in my Seattle apartment. I almost didn't answer. Our conversations typically left me emotionally drained, but something told me I should pick up. "Amber, your father's 60th birthday is next month." As if I were a prop needed to complete the family portrait. "Mom, I'm really busy with work right now. I'm not sure I can get away," I said, already feeling the familiar knot forming in my stomach. "Busy? Too busy for your own father's milestone birthday." Her voice took on that wounded tone I knew all too well. "Stephanie is flying in from Chicago with Kyle. What excuse could I possibly have?" "I'll have to check my schedule," I replied, knowing I was already caving. "Well, don't take too long. We need to finalize the catering numbers," my mother said. "Oh, and your father would really appreciate it if you could stay for the weekend, not just fly in and out for the party." By the end of the call, I had agreed to spend 4 days at my childhood home, the longest visit in 3 years. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of wine and called my closest friend, Zoe. "You don't have to go," she reminded me after listening to my anxious rambling. "You're an adult. You can say no." "I know," I sighed. But then I'd be the selfish daughter who couldn't be bothered to show up for her father's 60th. I'd never hear the end of it. "Just promise me you'll maintain your boundaries," Zoe said. "And call me if things get too intense." The next few weeks passed too quickly, and soon I found myself on a plane to Portland, a knot of anxiety growing with each passing mile. Driving through my old neighborhood felt surreal. Everything looked smaller somehow, less impressive than in my memories. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home and sat for a moment, gathering my courage before grabbing my suitcase from the trunk. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her critical gaze immediately taking inventory of my appearance. "Your hair's different," she said instead of hello, frowning slightly at my shoulder-length cut. "You looked better with it long." "Hello to you too, Mom," I replied. And I noticed that the ones featuring me alone had been replaced with newer pictures of Stephanie, her husband Kyle, and their lavish Chicago wedding from 2 years ago. A wedding I'd attended solo. Watching my parents beam with pride as they welcomed Kyle into the family. My father emerged from his study, giving me an awkward side hug. "Good to see you, kiddo. How was the flight?" "Fine." Straightening a cushion on the couch that didn't need straightening. "We thought we'd all go out for dinner tonight to kick off the birthday weekend." I was shown to my old bedroom, which had been converted into a guest room shortly after I left for college. All traces of my childhood had been erased. My art, my books, the blue walls I'd loved replaced with a neutral beige. Meanwhile, Stephanie's room remained a shrine to her high school achievements, preserved exactly as she'd left it. I had just finished unpacking when I heard the front door open and my mother's delighted squeal. "They're here. Amber, come down and greet your sister." Taking a deep breath, I headed downstairs to find Stephanie holding court in the living room, my parents hanging on her every word as she described some crisis at work that she'd brilliantly resolved. She looked up as I entered, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "There's my baby sister," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug that felt more performative than affectionate. "Look at you. Still rocking that artistic single girl style, I see." And there it was, the first dig, carefully packaged as sisterly observation. My parents beamed at her as if she'd said something charming. "Good to see you too, Stephanie," I said evenly. "Hi, Kyle." Her husband gave me a polite nod. I'd always gotten the impression he wasn't entirely comfortable with Stephanie's treatment of me. But he never intervened. Amber's design business is doing quite well, my father said. In what felt like a rare moment of recognition, Stephanie immediately jumped in. Oh, that's right. Those little logos and websites you make. That must be fun, like an extended college project. Kyle's firm just acquired a major healthcare client. They're handling the entire marketing strategy. Any acknowledgement of my accomplishments was swallowed by Stephanie's need to redirect attention. The pattern was so familiar it would have been comical if it didn't still hurt. Throughout dinner at my father's favorite steakhouse, Stephanie dominated the conversation, interrupting me whenever I tried to contribute. She asked pointed questions about my love life, expressing exaggerated sympathy when I mentioned I wasn't currently seeing anyone. Don't worry, she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Some people take longer to settle down. Not everyone finds their soulmate at 26 like I did. Back at the house, I excused myself early, claiming jet lag. In my beige guest room, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I would survive 3 more days of this. I opened my bedside drawer out of habit and was surprised to find an old diary I'd kept as a teenager. I read entry after entry documenting incidents of Stephanie's cruelty and my parents' indifference. The raw pain in those adolescent words confirmed what I'd sometimes doubted in adulthood. My memories weren't exaggerated. If anything, time had softened the edges of how truly isolated I'd felt in my own family. I fell asleep clutching that diary, a strange comfort in having this evidence of my younger self's reality. I woke early the next morning, hoping to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee before anyone else was up. No such luck. My mother was already in the kitchen, surrounded by party supplies and lists. Good. You're up, she said when I appeared. I need help with these centerpieces. Your father wants everything to be perfect for tomorrow. I spent the next 2 hours cutting, arranging, and gluing according to my mother's exacting instructions, only to have her redo most of my work. I just have a specific vision, she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. You're creative. Those centerpieces are gorgeous. You're so talented, she gushed, not acknowledging the fact that I'd been working on them for hours. Thank you, sweetheart. Yet Stephanie was treated as if she'd saved the entire party. When she hung up, my mother actually applauded. What would we do without you? She sighed happily. I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment away from the Stephanie worship service. As I approached the hallway, I heard my name and paused, realizing my sister was talking about me to our parents. I'm just worried about Amber, Stephanie was saying, her voice dripping with false concern. She seemed so bitter. Did you notice how she barely mentioned any friends in Seattle? I think she's lonely but too proud to admit it. She's always been that way, my mother agreed. So independent, but maybe too isolated. Not everyone has your social gifts, Stephanie. And that chip on her shoulder about her childhood, Stephanie continued, still acting like she was some neglected waif when we all know she had every advantage. It's like she needs to believe she had it rough to excuse why her life is so limited. Now, Stephanie, my father said, but his tone was indulgent rather than reproving. Your sister just has a different path. A path that's made her pretty miserable from what I can see, Stephanie replied. I've tried so hard to include her over the years, but she always pushes me away. Remember how she barely participated in my wedding? Kyle's family thought she was so cold. I'd heard enough. I was walking to the bathroom and heard my name being discussed, I replied. Hard to miss when you're all talking about what a bitter disappointment I am. That's not what we said at all, Stephanie protested, immediately shifting to her wounded voice. I was expressing concern about you, Amber. If you'd heard the whole conversation. I heard enough, I cut in. I heard you characterizing my life as limited, and suggesting I'm making up childhood neglect for attention. Well, you do tend to exaggerate, my mother said with a dismissive wave. You've always been so sensitive. Sensitive? Is that what you call noticing when your parents miss your performances but never your sisters? Or when they convert your room to a guest room before you've even finished your first semester of college, while preserving your sister's room like a museum exhibit? Here we go again. My father sighed. Amber, it's my birthday weekend. Can we please not do this now? Do what? Have an honest conversation for once, I asked. Stephanie's eyes welled with perfectly timed tears. I was just trying to help. I love you, Amber, and I hate seeing you so unhappy. Why do you always twist my words and make me the villain? And there it was, Stephanie's masterful victim flip. And never looking back. But some stubborn part of me refused to give them the satisfaction. I'm sorry you feel attacked when confronted with your own words, Stephanie, I said finally. Not quite the apology they wanted, but the best I could manage. My mother clicked her tongue disapprovingly but seemed willing to move on rather than escalate further. Let's focus on the party preparations, shall we? The rest of the day passed in a tense truce. She accidentally spilled red wine on my white blouse, one of only 2 nice outfits I'd packed for the weekend. Oops. So clumsy of me, she said with an unconvincing grimace. Good thing it didn't get on the tablecloth. I excused myself to try salvaging my top, furious but not surprised. When I returned to my room later that night, I immediately sensed something was off. My suitcase had been moved slightly, and my laptop wasn't positioned exactly as I'd left it. Looking more carefully, I noticed my journal wasn't in the nightstand drawer where I'd returned it that morning. After searching frantically, I found it tucked under the mattress. Definitely not where I'd put it. Did you go through my room yesterday? I asked directly. She barely glanced at me in the mirror. Why would I do that? My things were moved. My journal wasn't where I left it. Maybe Mom was cleaning, she suggested, carefully applying mascara. Or maybe you're being paranoid again. Honestly, Amber, not everything is a conspiracy against you. If you're still dwelling on childhood squabbles, that's more about you than me. Squabbles? You deliberately sabotaged me repeatedly. You spread rumors about me. You destroyed my projects. Wow. It's actually kind of sad how much you need to believe that. I felt my hands shaking with rage. I don't need to believe anything. I lived it. And now you're going through my private things to see what I've written about you. I don't care what you've written about me, she snapped, her friendly facade cracking slightly. Unlike you. My precious little business that supports me quite well, you mean? Not all of us need to marry rich to feel successful, Stephanie. Her eyes flashed dangerously. Take that back. Why? You dish out nasty comments constantly, but can't take even one in return. Kyle and I married for love. The fact that his family has money is completely irrelevant. Sure it is. What on earth is going on? My mother demanded. Nothing, Stephanie said quickly, her expression instantly transforming to one of calm innocence. Just a little sister talk. Right, Amber? The same expectation I'd been fulfilling my entire life. Right, I said finally. Just sister talk. But as I turned to go back to my room, I knew something had fundamentally changed. Because the look she gave me when our parents weren't watching wasn't just angry, it was afraid. The morning after my father's birthday party, I woke up with a sense of resolve. The celebration had gone as expected. Stephanie as the perfect daughter giving a tearful speech about our amazing parents, me relegated to the background, acknowledged only when absolutely necessary. I'd smiled and played my part one last time, but I was done. I started packing my suitcase, planning to leave that afternoon instead of the following day as originally scheduled. I'd book a hotel near the airport for the night, and take the earliest flight back to Seattle in the morning. The decision brought immediate relief. Like setting down a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years. I was folding my clothes when Stephanie appeared in the doorway of my room. Leaving so soon? She asked, leaning against the doorframe. I have work to get back to, I replied, not looking up. Running away, you mean? As usual. She stepped into the room uninvited. Mom and Dad were just saying how you barely participated in the party yesterday. Dad was disappointed. I continued packing. I'm sure they'll get over it. They have you to console them after all. It's not my fault you chose to be the weird, antisocial one. I zipped my suitcase closed and finally looked at her. I'm not doing this anymore. The competition, the comparisons, the constant need to prove myself to people who will never see me clearly. I'm done. You win, okay? You've always been their favorite and you always will be. Congratulations. Something in my tone must have alarmed her because her expression shifted from smugness to something more uncertain. So what, you're just going to abandon our family? That's therapy talk. Did your Seattle shrink teach you that? I picked up my suitcase and moved toward the door. I need to finish getting ready to leave. She blocked my path. No. We're going to finish this conversation. You don't get to drop these dramatic statements and then walk away. Move, Stephanie. Or what? She challenged, stepping closer. You'll push past me? Make a scene? We both know you won't. You'll do what you've always done, back down, slink away, and then complain later about how unfair it all is. I heard footsteps on the stairs, our parents, no doubt coming to investigate the raised voices. Perfect timing as always to witness me supposedly causing problems again. I'm not backing down this time, I said quietly. I'm choosing to walk away from a toxic dynamic. There's a difference. Toxic? You spoiled, ungrateful. She cut herself off as our parents appeared in the hallway. What's going on here? My father asked, looking between us with a frown. Amber's leaving early, Stephanie announced. Apparently we're all too toxic for her. My mother's face fell into practiced disappointment. Amber, really? After the lovely weekend we've had? I need to get back, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've already arranged everything. You always do this, my father sighed. Create drama and then run away before we can resolve anything. The unfairness of his statement hit me like a physical blow. Create drama? When have I ever been the one creating drama in this family? See, Stephanie said triumphantly. Always the victim. Never taking responsibility. Something inside me finally broke. 28 years of swallowed words and suppressed feelings came pouring out. You've been sabotaging me my entire life, I said, turning to face her fully. You've manipulated our parents, undermined me at every opportunity, and then played innocent when called out. You pushed me down in school and stepped on me to climb higher. And you're still doing it now. That's ridiculous. She sputtered, but I could see panic flaring in her eyes. Is it? What about ruining my art project before the competition? Or stealing my concert tickets? Or spreading rumors that I cheated on exams? What about going through my things yesterday looking for ammunition to use against me? Girls, please, my mother interjected. This is ancient history. Can't we just? No, Mom, we can't just anything, I interrupted. For once in my life, I'm going to say what needs to be said, and you're all going to listen. I turned back to Stephanie. You're not concerned about me or my well-being. You never have been. You're concerned about maintaining your position as the golden child, and you'll do anything to protect that, including tearing me down at every opportunity. Stephanie's face contorted with rage. You self-righteous bitch. You have no idea what it's like to have a sister like you, always judging, always thinking you're so much smarter than everyone else with your precious art and your perfect grades. Stephanie, my mother gasped, more shocked by her golden child's language than the content of her words. But Stephanie was beyond caring about appearances now. She stepped toward me. Someone had to be the daughter who actually gave a damn about this family. Step back, I said, holding my ground. You don't get to rewrite history to make yourself the victim here. We were standing at the top of the staircase now, our parents watching with shocked expressions as their adult daughters unleashed decades of pent-up resentment. I'm not rewriting anything, she hissed. You've never belonged in this family. You've always been the odd one out, and instead of trying to fit in, you wore it like some badge of honor. Maybe I didn't fit in because I wasn't allowed to, I replied. Maybe I was the odd one out because you and our parents made sure I stayed that way. Oh, that is such bull. Enough. And she couldn't back down now. You want to know the truth, Amber? Mom and Dad don't prefer me because I'm prettier or more social, or whatever victim narrative you've constructed. A genuine laugh of someone finally seeing the absurdity of a situation they've been trapped in for too long. You know what, Stephanie? I don't care anymore. I really don't. You can have them. What leverage did she have? You don't mean that, she said, suddenly uncertain. You're just being dramatic as usual. I've never been more serious in my life, I replied, picking up my suitcase again. Now please move so I can leave. Amber, don't do this, my mother pleaded. We can talk about this like adults. We've had 28 years to talk about it, Mom. Nothing's changed and nothing will. I moved to step around Stephanie, but she shifted to block me again. We were dangerously close to the top of the stairs now. You don't get to walk away from this, she said, her voice low and threatening. You don't get to act superior and then just leave. Watch me, I replied, attempting to sidestep her again. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As I moved to her left, Stephanie's hands came up and connected with my shoulders. I felt a sharp, hard push, deliberate, unmistakable. My feet lost contact with the floor as I toppled backward. I saw the shock on my parents' faces, frozen in the hallway. I saw Stephanie's expression shift from rage to momentary horror as she realized what she'd done. Then I was falling, tumbling down the hardwood staircase, my body connecting painfully with each step. The world spun and tilted as I finally came to rest at the bottom of the stairs, my body a crumpled heap on the entryway floor. Through the haze of pain, I heard panicked voices above me. Oh my God! My mother's horrified cry. Amber! My father's shout. And then Stephanie, her voice instantly composed. She slipped. I tried to grab her, but she lost her balance. Mom, Dad. Black spots danced in my vision as I heard my parents rushing down the stairs. Should we call an ambulance? My mother's voice uncertain. I don't know if that's necessary. Stephanie again. Their voices faded in and out as consciousness began to slip away from me. The last thing I heard before darkness claimed me was Stephanie's calm, controlled tone. We need to be careful how we handle this. You know how Amber can be. She might try to twist what happened. Then nothing. Which was encased in a cast, and my ribcage, which protested with sharp stabs whenever I tried to breathe deeply. Blinking against the harsh fluorescent lighting. You hit your head pretty hard. You were angry and not watching where you were going. Accidents happen. It wasn't an accident, I insisted, ignoring the pain that flared with each word. She pushed me. Deliberately. You and Dad saw it. We saw you lose your balance during an argument, she countered smoothly. Stephanie tried to grab you, but she couldn't reach you in time. The gaslighting was so immediate, so practiced, that for a brief moment I questioned my own memory. Had I imagined the force of Stephanie's hands against my shoulders? It was clear my mother had already decided on the version of events she was willing to accept. After helping me take a few sips through a straw, my mother checked her watch. I should let the nurse know you're awake. And I need to call your father. Once she left the room, I closed my eyes, trying to piece together the fragmented memories of the fall and its aftermath. I vaguely recalled being loaded into an ambulance, my mother accompanying me while my father and Stephanie followed in their car. I remembered a doctor shining a light in my eyes and asking me questions I couldn't focus enough to answer. A gentle knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. A nurse with kind eyes and Jessica on her name tag entered, carrying a tablet. Good to see you awake, Miss Hayes, she said, checking my vitals and making notes. The doctor will be in shortly to go over your scans and treatment plan. As she adjusted my she glanced toward the door to make sure we were alone. Your mother mentioned you fell down the stairs, she said casually. Accidents at home are more common than people realize. Something in her tone made me look at her more closely. The emphasis she placed on lost your balance told me she wasn't entirely convinced by that explanation. I didn't lose my balance, I said quietly. My sister pushed me. What inconsistencies? The distribution and angle of your injuries, she explained, lowering her voice. The doctors noted that they're more consistent with being propelled down the stairs rather than simply falling. Especially the bruising pattern on your upper back and shoulders. She helps patients who may be experiencing complicated family situations. After Jessica left, promising to return with pain medication, I lay back against the pillows, a strange mix of validation and dread washing over me. On one hand, medical professionals had identified physical evidence supporting my version of events. On the other, the implications were devastating. My sister had deliberately tried to hurt me, possibly seriously, and my parents were actively covering for her. The doctor came in shortly after, explaining my injuries in clinical detail and outlining a recovery timeline of several weeks. My mother returned during this conversation, immediately taking charge and asking questions about aftercare as if she'd be the one handling it. She can recover at our house, she told the doctor confidently. We have a guest room on the main floor, so she won't have to deal with stairs. The thought of being dependent on my family during recovery sent a chill through me. Actually, I interjected. I have friends who can help me, I insisted. And my apartment building has an elevator. Before my mother could argue further, there was another knock at the door. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a calm demeanor entered. I'm Diane Miller, one of the hospital's social workers, she introduced herself. I routinely check in with patients who've experienced traumatic injuries to see if there are any support services we can offer. My mother immediately went on alert. That's very thoughtful. But we're fine. Amber will be recovering with family. Actually, Diane said smoothly, hospital policy requires that I speak with patients privately. It helps ensure they can express any concerns freely. What concerns would she have? My mother asked sharply. Mom, I said, summoning what energy I had left. Could you please give us a few minutes? Maybe get some coffee. After my mother reluctantly left, shooting suspicious glances at Diane, the social worker pulled up a chair beside my bed. Jessica mentioned you might benefit from our support services, she said directly. She was concerned about the circumstances of your fall. For a moment I hesitated. Speaking the truth aloud to a professional would make it real in a way I wasn't sure I was prepared for. But I was tired of secrets and lies and pretending. My sister pushed me down the stairs during an argument, I said, the words coming out in a rush. My parents witnessed it, but they're saying I slipped. Diane nodded, her expression compassionate but unsurprised. Unfortunately, family violence is more common than most people realize. Can you tell me more about what happened in your relationship with your sister? Over the next 30 minutes, I gave her a condensed version of my family dynamics and the events leading up to the fall. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Do you have somewhere else you can stay until you're cleared to travel back to Seattle? I could get a hotel, I said, though the logistics of managing that with my injuries seemed daunting. Especially when the injuries are as serious as yours. As if on cue, there was yet another knock, and a man in a hospital security uniform entered after Diane called for him to come in. I understand there are some concerns about how your injuries occurred. Before I could respond, my mother reappeared in the doorway, her expression hardening when she saw the security officer. This is ridiculous, my mother huffed. She fell down the stairs during an argument. Why is security involved? Mom, I said wearily, please wait outside. After she reluctantly left again, Michael turned back to me. Ms. Hayes, our hospital takes patient safety very seriously. The medical team has noted some inconsistencies between your injuries and the reported cause. And they're both claiming I slipped. He nodded thoughtfully. Ms. Hayes, you may not be aware, but our hospital has security cameras in all stairwells and most public areas. Glancing at his notes, according to our records, while you were being transferred from the ER to this room yesterday evening, your sister had what the staff described as an emotional outburst in the stairwell. She was overheard making concerning statements about what had happened at your parents' home. Hospital policy allows patients to view security footage if it directly pertains to their care and safety. He queued up a video and handed me the tablet. The timestamp showed it was from the previous evening. The footage showed a hospital stairwell with Stephanie pacing back and forth, talking agitatedly on her phone. The audio was surprisingly clear. Kyle, you're not listening, she was saying. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I just wanted to scare her, make her back down. How was I supposed to know she'd fall so badly? A pause as she listened to whatever her husband was saying. Of course Mom and Dad are covering for me. What else would they do? But the doctors are asking questions about her injuries. Apparently they don't match a typical fall pattern or something. Another pause. No, she was unconscious when we arrived, but what if she remembers? What if she tells them I pushed her? My hand shook as I watched my sister essentially confessing to what she'd done, confirming every suspicion I'd had. Michael gently took the tablet back when the clip ended. There's more. He said. Your sister had a similar conversation with your parents in another stairwell about an hour later. The footage clearly shows them discussing how to maintain the story that you slipped. Despite your mother expressing concern that the medical staff seemed skeptical. Tears filled my eyes, not of sadness but of vindication. After a lifetime of being gaslit and dismissed, here was undeniable proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't exaggerating, wasn't imagining things. What happens now? I asked, wiping my eyes. That's largely up to you, Michael said. As a mandated reporter, I'm required to document this incident, especially given the severity of your injuries. The hospital is obligated to preserve this footage. That would be an option, yes, Diane, the social worker, confirmed. What your sister did constitutes assault, possibly even aggravated assault given the serious injuries that resulted. Hadn't that break already happened the moment Stephanie's hands connected with my shoulders at the top of those stairs? I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, Diane nodded. These are significant decisions that shouldn't be rushed. In the meantime, we need to ensure your immediate safety. I don't recommend returning to your parents' home, given what we now know. I'll arrange for hotel accommodations nearby until you're cleared to travel, Michael offered. The hospital has protocols for situations like this. Just then, my hospital room door opened again, and Stephanie herself walked in, stopping short when she saw Michael and Diane. What's going on? She asked, her voice falsely bright. Mom said there were people in here questioning you about your fall. The audacity of her appearance. The casual way she referenced your fall, as if it had been some random accident, it ignited something in me. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and for the first time saw her clearly. Not as the golden child, not as my tormentor, but as someone so deeply insecure and threatened by my existence that she'd been willing to physically harm me rather than lose her position of dominance. Then flushed with anger. That's not what happened, and you know it. You're doing it again. Twisting things to make yourself the victim. Miss Hayes, Michael interjected, addressing Stephanie. I should inform you that the hospital has security footage of you discussing the incident in our stairwells. You were quite explicit about having pushed your sister. But you're misinterpreting. We have the audio, Stephanie, I interrupted. Crystal clear. I just wanted to scare her, make her back down. How was I supposed to know she'd fall so badly? Those were your exact words. She stared at me, speechless for perhaps the first time in her life. Then, in a desperate pivot, she tried one last manipulation. Amber, please, she said, her voice dropping to a pleading whisper. We're sisters. Family. Whatever issues we have, we can work them out privately. You don't want to do this. I studied her face, the face I'd grown up both loving and fearing, and felt nothing but a profound weariness. You should go now, I said quietly. And tell Mom and Dad not to come back either. I'll be making my own arrangements for recovery. You can't be serious, she sputtered. Over one mistake? One moment of anger. It wasn't just one moment, Stephanie. It was a lifetime of moments. This was just the one that finally got caught on camera. Michael stood up, positioning himself subtly between my bed and my sister. Miss Hayes, I think it would be best if you left now. The patient needs rest. For a second, Stephanie looked like she might argue further, but something in Michael's stance made her reconsider. Exhausted but strangely peaceful. For the first time in my life, I had external validation of what I'd always known. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't exaggerating, and I wasn't the problem. Are you all right? Emotional recovery from a lifetime of family dysfunction is even slower. After 5 days in the hospital, I was discharged with a cast on my right arm, a brace to support my fractured ribs, and a follow-up appointment with a neurologist for my concussion. True to his word, Michael from hospital security had arranged accommodation at a nearby hotel instead of returning to my parents' house. But I refused to see them. My mother left tearful voicemails about family loyalty and forgiveness. My father sent terse texts about resolving this situation like adults. Neither of them acknowledged what had actually happened, continuing to frame it as an unfortunate accident rather than a deliberate act of violence. Stephanie didn't try to contact me directly. The day after my discharge, I met with Officer Taylor from the Portland Police Department to file a formal report. I provided her with my medical records and explained that the hospital had security footage of my sister essentially confessing to the assault. She acknowledged. But assault is assault, regardless of who commits it. 2 days later, Stephanie was arrested and charged with second-degree assault. She was released on bail almost immediately, and within hours, the calls and texts from my parents intensified. "How could you do this to your own sister?" my mother demanded in one particularly hysterical voicemail. "To our family?" attempting to appeal to my practical side. "This legal nonsense will cost a fortune and drag on for months. Is that really what you want? To bankrupt your sister and brother-in-law? Serve no jail time but complete community service and anger management classes." I accepted. The court also granted my request for a restraining order prohibiting Stephanie from contacting me directly for 2 years. When the news of the plea deal reached my parents, they reached out again, this time suggesting a family counseling session to begin healing. I declined, as if that biological fact trumped all other considerations. "And we're your parents. Biology doesn't entitle anyone to abuse me," I replied. "When you're ready to acknowledge what actually happened, not just on the stairs that day, but throughout our family history, then maybe we can talk about healing." They didn't respond to that. My first stop after settling back into my apartment was the office of Dr. Willis, a therapist specializing in family trauma. "Family dynamics like yours don't develop overnight," she explained during our first session. "And they can't be resolved overnight either. This will be a process." And what a process it was. Over the next 6 months, I learned to recognize the voice in my head that constantly questioned my perceptions, a voice that sounded suspiciously like my mother's, and challenge it with evidence from reality. I also discovered the incredible value of chosen family. My friend Zoe insisted on staying with me during my first week back home, helping with everyday tasks that were difficult with my injuries. My colleagues organized meal deliveries and transportation to medical appointments. My neighbor Mark checked in regularly. I'd ventured out to purchase new brushes, determined to get back to painting despite my still healing arm. He noticed my awkward movements and offered to carry my purchases to my car. "I don't normally accept help from strangers," I told him, "but I'm making an exception because that watercolor set is heavier than it looks." He laughed, and something in his warm, genuine smile made me accept his offer of coffee the following week. Unlike anyone I dated previously, Nathan really listened when I eventually shared the story of my family and my recovery. He didn't try to minimize my experience or rush me toward forgiveness. He simply acknowledged my pain and my strength in facing it. "Family should be a source of support, not damage," he said simply. "I'm sorry yours wasn't." 6 months after the incident, I received a formal letter from my parents' attorney. They wanted to open lines of communication and mend the family unit. They offered to pay for joint counseling sessions with a therapist of their choosing. I showed the letter to Dr. Willis during our next session. "What do you want to do?" she asked after reading it. "Part of me wants to maintain the distance I've established," I admitted. "It's been peaceful, not constantly second-guessing myself or bracing for the next criticism or comparison. They're part of the conditioning you received throughout your life, that your role was to accommodate, to keep the peace, to accept less than you deserved. But guilt isn't always an accurate moral compass, especially for someone who's been consistently gaslighted about their own experiences." After careful consideration, I sent a response outlining my conditions for reestablishing contact, acknowledgement of the assault and the patterns that preceded it, separate individual therapy for each family member before any joint sessions, and a commitment to respecting my boundaries going forward. My parents replied with a counteroffer that met none of these conditions but instead suggested a fresh start, where we would put the past behind us. I declined and maintained my distance. Meanwhile, I continued healing in other ways. I started an art therapy group for survivors of family abuse, creating a safe space for others to process their experiences through creative expression. My graphic design business expanded, and I hired an assistant to help manage the growing workload. I began painting again, producing a series of works that explored themes of visibility, voice, and reclamation. Nathan became a constant source of support and joy in my life, introducing me to his own family, people who related to each other with respect, affection, and healthy boundaries. Watching his interactions with his parents and siblings was like observing an alien species at first, but gradually helped me understand what family relationships could and should be. 8 months after the assault, I received an unexpected email from Kyle, Stephanie's husband. He and Stephanie had separated, he explained. I'm sorry for my part in enabling her behavior over the years. His apology, unlike any I'd received from my actual family, acknowledged the reality of what had happened without excuses or deflection. Didn't change the past, but it validated my experience in a way that helped heal some of the lingering doubts I sometimes still battled. A year after the incident, I received another letter from my parents. This one was different, less formal, more personal, and notably not sent through their attorney. They acknowledged that Stephanie had indeed pushed me and admitted they had witnessed it. They expressed regret for their failure to protect me, both in that moment and throughout my childhood. They didn't offer excuses or ask for immediate reconciliation, just opened the door to the possibility of a new relationship based on truth rather than denial. It wasn't a perfect letter. It didn't address every instance of favoritism or gaslighting I'd experienced. But it was a start, the first time they had acknowledged any responsibility in the family dynamics that had culminated in my sister's assault. I responded cautiously, and eventually to carefully structured in-person meetings with both a beginning and ending time established in advance. Rebuilding trust, if it's possible at all, takes time. But we're finding a new way to relate, one based on who we actually are rather than the roles we were assigned in our family script. As for Stephanie, we haven't spoken directly since the day in the hospital when she learned about the security footage. According to my parents, she's still in therapy. The security camera footage that captured my sister's confession did more than provide evidence for a legal case. It shattered a lifetime of gaslighting, proving definitively that my perceptions were accurate, my experience is real. Sometimes the truth is painful, but it's also freeing. In my case, it literally set me free from self-doubt, from toxic family patterns, and from the burden of constantly seeking validation from people who couldn't or wouldn't provide it. I still have the occasional nightmare about falling down those stairs, about the moment of betrayal when my sister's hands connected with my shoulders. But those dreams are becoming less frequent as I build a life filled with people who value me exactly as I am. Sometimes you have to fall all the way down before you can finally stand up for yourself. And sometimes the people who should catch you are the ones who push you. But here's what I've learned. Even after the hardest fall, you can pick yourself up. You can heal. You can create the family you deserve, one built on mutual respect, genuine care, and unconditional love. Your story might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family trauma and building a life filled with authentic connections. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family that truly loves you isn't the one you were born into, but the one you choose to create.